Hey everyone, so in today's video what we're going to be doing is having another look at HGiG or dynamic tone mapping through the PS4 or through the TV, so the LG C9 OLED. So what we're going to do is just turn the volume down a little on that. So what we'll do is we'll get this started, and what I'm going to do is I'll just pause it and we'll have a look at what sort of difference it makes. Tone mapping, depending on which one you use, whether it be HGiG or the built-in dynamic tone mapping, and also what it's like when it's just off. So if we pull up the settings, and at the moment it's not actually in game mode, so first thing we'll do is we'll switch over to game mode, and we'll come down to, I believe it's in picture options, no, advanced, and then dynamic tone mapping. So currently it's on. That's what happens when you turn it off. So dynamic tone mapping on brightens the picture quite considerably, and then HGiG is pretty much the same. HGiG, as we found on The Last of Us when we had a look at that game, will only really affect the highlights. It's not affecting the shadows and everything else as dynamic tone mapping does. So whereas dynamic tone mapping literally just brightens the whole image and pulls up the shadow detail, HGiG tends to be more a case of highlight detail. So just in that particular scene where the floodlights were, we just leave it on this, just so then we can actually get some of the floodlights just here, and just see what type of effect this has on those. I mean, in this particular game I wouldn't expect this to be having that big of an impact. HGiG and off are pretty much identical. Dynamic tone mapping, obviously it's boosting it slightly, although just on HGiG I'm not sure how well this will actually come across on camera. Let me just see if I can try and pull that there. That might be a bit better. So if you notice on there, it's actually slightly better on the camera than it actually is in reality in terms of what was seen in the sky in that image. If it just comes back out of this replay, just on that scene there, what you're actually seeing on the camera was actually slightly different to what I was seeing to the eye. So there's a lot more definition on the camera, so all of these clouds here that you're actually seeing, it's probably not as noticeable to the naked eye. But on there, obviously you can see it is blowing it out, and that's probably a better representation in terms of what it's actually doing in terms of what I see on screen. So by having it on, it will actually just blow out all of those clouds. Floodlights, pretty much no change between any of them. So what I'm looking at is these floodlights along the top here. That should be the peak. That should be the brightest point. What I might do is switch it to a night game and see if that actually has any difference to it. Okay, so here we are back now with a night Champions League game playing, and what we'll do is once again we'll have a look at, sorry, just get rid of that, just have a look at the HGiG settings and see what sort of a difference the three settings make. So expert controls down to dynamic tone mapping. So at the moment it's actually off. If we go to on, the whole picture just gets a bit of a boost. So it just enhances everything. The colours pop a little bit more. Shadow detail is raised slightly without actually blowing out any highlight detail from what I can see in this particular shot. HGiG off compared to on in this particular game, no difference at all on this scene at the moment. What we'll do is we'll just let it progress a little. I was hoping for this shot here. No, from that brief look, it didn't look like it made any difference to the floodlights. what I'm looking at is all of these floodlights along the top here, and once we actually get back to the in-game play, I'm hoping that it'll actually show some of the floodlights to actually pop a little bit more. I mean, there you can see that the dynamic tone mapping, that does make quite a big difference. Now, this is the scene that I wanted, so if I just, no, between HGiG on and off, it's not making any difference to these row of lights. So it's not actually picking up the fact that that's where the is supposedly projecting from. Hopefully on this one. No, none of this, none of the light rays, none of the lights across the top there. I'm not seeing any difference. What I'll do, I'll just adjust the camera slightly. Right, so here we are back with a slightly different camera angle, and as you can see there, I'm looking at this sort of area here, and all of those light rays don't seem to have any difference between the two. Enabling dynamic tone mapping compared to off, it does brighten the picture considerably. And HGiG off or on, is exactly the same. Now I don't know whether this may not actually be one of the games that do actually support HGiG. Obviously it is a HDR game. It did actually switch, and it did the handshake to switch between Dolby Vision, which is my default, into HDR. But just looking at this, obviously there's no noticeable difference on anything, on any of the highlights. And in the Last of Us, when I did that previously, we did notice whenever we had a light source, so these kind of projected light beams, rays, you would notice. Personally, with this particular game, I would actually probably suggest having dynamic tone mapping on. It does give a bit of extra vibrancy without actually being overboard and blowing everything out. Also, this is one of those games where just in terms of play shadows and things like that, it just seems to clean up the picture quite well. So yeah, no noticeable difference between them whatsoever. So yeah, so if you're playing FIFA 20, I'd suggest, for my personal subjective opinion, that having dynamic tone mapping on is probably the preferred option. And seeing as the PlayStation is now starting to sound like an aeroplane about to take off, I think we'll call it a day at that. As always, thanks for watching. If you did like the video, obviously hit the thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel out quite a bit. And as always, thanks for watching.